The video retrospectives I've been working on recently aren't for games that I've selected randomly. These are all games that somehow impacted me in various ways during my formative years. Experiences that stuck with me for good and bad. This particular review is slightly different to my previous ones, in that the game, despite being a rather average arcade port to a 16-bit console, changed a lot of things in my life. Let me explain. I grew up as an only child for the first 7 years of my existence on this mortal coil. Never having met my father, I lived with my mother, 2 uncles and grandmother in the desolate Masonette in East London. School was just a stone's throw away, for a small park that my block was just on the edge of. My days as an introverted kid involved going to school, and upon my return home I flicked on children's ITV, dutifully watching classics such as Dreamstone, Teabag, How To, even Huxley Pig. Huxley fucking Pig. Bonus points if you remember that one. Fun fact, the Commodore 64 Huxley game had a bloody frustrating reversal of controls mechanic when bitten by the snake. I hate that slivery bastard to this very day. After dinner, or earlier if there was now I fancied watching on the telly box, I'd usually boot up my Commodore 64, later the Mega Drive, and play games until my predetermined bedtime. It was this routine, school, TV, games, bed, that would pretty much define my early life. Weekends were practically gaming days. I wasn't outgoing, didn't really have any friends to speak of. I was about as sporty as an onion, and perhaps equally as pungent. I never really knew any different. I wasn't really encouraged to get out and play. Instead, I was often bought loads of cheap C64 cassette tapes from the local market to dive into. Worlds where I would lose myself in for hours, half of which was spent in front of epilepsy-inducing colourful loading bars. Shift and run stop, press play on tape. Then shortly before my 8th birthday, something strange happened. My mum came into my room while I was watching some cartoon or other, and with her was this random bloke. He said hi. I didn't think too much of it, engrossed in the animation spooled from the VHS top loader. My mum didn't have any friends, especially male ones. Where did he come from? But little was I to know that this gentleman would go on to change my life in significant ways. This man quickly became my stepfather. Over time, I bonded with him. One thing he was quite distant on was gaming, where one of my uncles would play the co-op Disney gem World of Illusion with me on occasion, a time I treasure dearly. My stepdad just wasn't interested in the whole gaming thing. He just couldn't stand the iconic bit-crushed Sega chant that blared out of the Sonic games I adored. I don't remember exactly when or how I acquired Mercs. All I remember is that I was playing it in the living room, as often I did, when my stepdad became interested for some reason. Was it the warlike action? The overhead view of the battlefield? To this day I've no idea. But the fact that this man, in his late 20s at the time, wanted me to show him how to use this control pad thingy. So I taught him. I explained the directional pad, the buttons, and obviously start to pause. Quite simple stuff back then before you had your multiple triggers and your analog sticks. One button to shoot, one button to use a screen clearing mega bomb. So he got to playing, and surprisingly was not too bad at the game. Capcom's Mercs was ported from the arcade to the Mega Drive by Sega itself, a lesser version that still managed to hold its own in the graphics department. The player directs a blue jumpsuit wearing bloke with a big gun for environments filled with a bunch of enemies, all spewing bullets in your general direction. The box art says it all really, does exactly what it says on the tin. It's not deep given its arcade origin, and my stepdad was able to adapt and learn its systems quickly. Soon we'd be having competitions as to who could get the furthest in their allocated amount of lives. Sometimes he would win. It was something we could do together. Despite the fact that the arcade original had a 3-player cabinet, this was purely a solo version. Many an evening was spent taking turns trying to get past the tank line that fired missiles into your face if you got too close. We both particularly liked the death animation if you were blown up as you lost a life. The commando's arms outstretched as he flies into the air yelling, "Wah!" It's the little things. More games should incorporate such fun noises. The closest equivalent is grenading elites off the edge of a cliff in the original Halo. After beating the arcade mode several times, I'd noticed in the options menu that you could select original mode. I had no idea what this meant at the time, but it changed the game considerably. Instead of just a commando collecting different weapons to use as he saw fit, dropped from boxes, now you reach a nondescript strange tent in its redesigned levels. Entering the tent gives access to a shop system, and upon entry a message. A new recruit has joined your squad. Each new member of the squad had their own weapon and stats. Now at any point you could take advantage of a different soldier with their own weapon and life bar. This created a strategy game where swapping out your playable grunt can make certain areas easier, or perhaps using the other squaddies to preserve the one best suited for an upcoming boss. Swapping out injured men for another brought back memories of a similar mechanic in Konami's first NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, where you could swap between turtles with different weapons and stats and health levels in exactly the same way as Mercs, via the pause screen. Ah, Homing, everyone's favourite family man. Husband of Merge, father of Bort, Laser and Maggot. It changed the game completely, added layers of depth and changed the layouts of most levels, adding new boss encounters, making all that previous muscle memory useless. Essentially this also meant that the live system was overhauled. Squaddies were your lives. If they all died it meant game over. Deceased soldiers could be revived at the tent shops along the way, for a high fee. We mainly played this original mode for the future, again taking it in turns to get the furthest. I enjoyed these competitions with my stepdad. I looked forward to coming home from school to try and beat him. In the end, he was very formidable. This began a pattern. In later years he didn't play every game, didn't play many games at all actually. He was very selective. It wasn't until GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64 that he became an absolute beast. Again I taught him the controls, how it all works, and yet the bastard ended up surpassing my skills. Proximity mines on spawn points were his signature move, though he was quite adept with a grenade launcher, firing off some corner trick shots like a pyromaniac Ronnie O'Sullivan. We played that together for years, to the point where he became the multiplayer master. Perfect Dark followed, where again he used to beat my arse maybe 65% of the time. Damn those proximity mines to hell. Later challenges we indulged in included the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life. Every Christmas for about a decade, hard difficulty, only 2 quick saves per level allowed. Upon death the other person gets a go. I won this challenge every year, though he was always close behind. One year I was cocky and celebrated by firing a rocket, only to realise all too late that the game teleports you to a small dark room after the final boss. Essentially I blew myself up via unseen wall and gave him another go.
Major lacerations detected.
He managed to catch up and beat the Nilanth, and we needed a tiebreaker. Alas, the tiebreaker I won. These days we don't play many games together. He doesn't really play games at all, though he unexpectedly got deep into Call of Duty Warzone when I introduced him to it. But the great memories remain. I often mention Mercs in particular, that entry drug that started our playful rivalry. He looks back fondly, as I do, but he has no desire to ever replay the game. I think he's just scared I'll beat him these days. Don't tell him I said that though. So that was the story of my relationship with my dad, starting via a little game called Mercs. For that reason alone, it will always have a special place in my gaming history, and my heart. Is it a must play? Nope. Is it important to gaming as a whole? Again, no. But it unexpectedly brought me and a relative stranger together, and changed both our lives in the process. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to try and dodge this incoming tank shell